Hello everyone. Welcome to my presentation on adding security to implantable medical devices. This work is the result of a joint collaboration between Erasmus Medical Center, University of Macedonia, and Information Technologies Institute, and is supported by the EU-funded project SDK for ED. First, I will go over the motivation behind this study. Then I will introduce the concept of technical debt. This will be followed by the description of our experiment design. Then I will discuss the results and conclude the presentation. So, over the last decade or so, we have seen a significant increase in the number of medical cybersecurity issues reported in the media. This can also be confirmed by the number of vulnerabilities officially documented by the US government agencies. Here we can clearly see a significant rise 2016 onwards. So why have the IMD manufacturers been slow in reacting to these issues? Firstly, the earliest guidance from the FDA on securing wireless medical devices was issued as late as 2013. Thus, this is still a transition period for IMD manufacturers. Secondly, the highly resource-constrained nature of IMDs could be perceived as prohibitive for incorporating mainstream security provisions while maintaining a high device autonomy and a small form factor. Fortunately, modern advances in embedded computing permit the ample use of such provisions without significantly impacting device autonomy. Thirdly, the steep recertification cost is a major impediment to rehashing IMD design to include security provisions. The fourth reason is that historically, the medical functionality codebase of IMDs has been slow to change, driven by a need for high reliability and by the fact that little functional change is necessary in such deeply embedded devices. However, adding a new security code base more crucially will impose a change of pace in IMD code updates and code maintainability. IMD security thus requires a design paradigm shift and also is suspect to introducing new perpetual costs for IMD code maintenance, which should be covered by the IMD industry. This final hypothesized reason is the main drive behind the current paper, which looks at IMD security from a fresh angle, that is it economically sustainable to add security to IMDs? Convincing the manufacturers that IMD security is economically viable and sustainable will liberate a lot of security solutions that are considered at the moment out of scope. In order to address this IMD economics question in a tangible way, we adopt the systematic concept of technical debt. Technical debt is primarily a software engineering concept. We prefer this over other methods because it covers a large variety of issues ranging from code convention violations to architectural problems. On top of that, the monetized nature of technical debt is proven to be a more tangible way to communicate maintainability benefits to non-software engineering stakeholders. Hardware costs, even if feasible to capture via technical debt, would be mostly irrelevant for IMDs. This is because hardware changes never occur within a given device's lifetime since it is implanted, and occur rarely within a given product line. So what is technical debt? Let's say we have two options to add a piece of functionality in a software. The first one is a tidy approach, but it takes a long time. The other option is to speed up the time to market at the cost of a poorly written code. Technical debt is a software engineering concept that expresses the implied development cost that is incurred due to taking shortcuts by sacrificing code quality in order to reduce the time to market of a product. This implied cost manifests itself as the additional effort that is required to develop and maintain the subsequent software releases that implement new functionality or features. It is exactly the new security features and their interplay with the existing medical functionality ones that we wish to address in this work. Technical debt is composed of two parts, principal and interest. The principal is the amount of money a company has to pay in order to develop a software release to its optimal quality. If optimal quality has not been reached, this effectively means saving effort, or in other words, money. This amount, that is the principal, increases the company's capital and can be invested in other activities. However, this internal loaning comes at a cost. Any future maintenance activity on the code base, for example, for accommodating a new feature, will require increased effort due to the less than optimal code quality and maintainability. This additional effort is equivalent to paying an interest on a loan. In this work, the different code releases of the IMD application are committed using the Git version control system. Technical debt principle is quantified via Sonar Cube, which first reflects the application source code against a set of predefined rules to identify violating code snippets. It then calculates the time required to resolve each violation. The total time required to fix all the violation represents the technical debt principle. Technical debt interest is calculated using the fitted framework, which assesses the interest by calculating the difference between the efforts required to maintain optimal and non-optimal software artifacts, respectively. These efforts are calculated using the maintainability metrics, which are coupling, cohesion, cyclomatic complexity, and the number of lines of code. The principal and interest are also used to calculate the breaking point, which is the point in the future in terms of code releases at which all savings accumulated by not repaying technical debt will have been exhausted as a result of the additional maintenance effort during the software evolution. I will now explain our experiment design. In order to capture the repercussions of introducing security, the technical debt analysis ideally requires all the application code releases to be provided by the IMD manufacturers. However, there are various obstacles to that approach. Firstly, there is no known repository that hosts application code from IMD manufacturers. Secondly, the sensitive nature of these products has made acquiring code sources directly from the manufacturers virtually impossible. The other potential option is to reverse engineer explanted IMDs. However, this method will only give us access to the firmware binaries at best. The above obstacles necessitate employing a code base that is synthetically created based on publicly available manuals, news articles, data sheets, and so on. As a result, we started by constructing such a historical record of IMD design changes captured as code releases over time, targeting both medical and security aspects of those IMDs. Technical debt is not affected by exact years. However, this historical record accurately dates back in the past as far as 1997 and extends to speculated future releases until 2028. The details of every code release are provided in the paper. It is important to note that the technical debt methodology is unaffected by the inclusion of future design points. Secondly, such points have been solely based on an actual published body of work. Whether they will find their way in commercial IMDs or not is of little significance for the message of the paper. Our confidence in the code base representability is further guarded by making it publicly available in this work so as to encourage a critical review and improvement by the various IMD stakeholders. For our experiments, we considered two prominent IMD application classes, which are neurostimulators and cardiac pacemakers. Cardiac implants hold the largest market share, whereas the neurostimulators are projected to witness the fastest growth. Roughly more than 50% of all IMDs in use belong to these two classes. We also used a fixed hardware platform which allows for an even comparison of the different code releases. The IMD manufacturers have used commercial off-the-shelf microcontrollers as their processing and controlling cores in the past points of our assumed period of study. As a result, we tested the IMD application source codes on an ARM Cortex-M0 Plus based MCU, since similar MCUs are used in modern IMDs. Moreover, the compiled code fits in the MCUs that were commercially available throughout the assumed period of study. Furthermore, for the cost associated with the wireless communication, a commercial implantable grade transceiver has been used. In order to keep the comparison of the different software releases also fair and minimally dependent on our coding skills, we employ static code analysis in order to determine whether the code quality and vulnerability levels were maintained throughout the various releases. This is based on a set of international quality and security standards. Lastly, our threat model assumes an attacker with full control of the wireless channel between the reader and the IMD. Now, I will discuss the results. In all plots, we have the same time series with the trends of the purely medical and the recently added security code. Looking at the technical debt principal and interest curves, it can be deduced that the security code is more costly to extend and maintain than the medical code. The interest especially is at least double for the security component. As a result, the accumulated TD, which is the accumulation of principal and interest, is mostly driven by security. By inspecting the total trend line, it is also interesting to notice that security-driven code changes will eventually overtake medical-driven ones in the future. Yet, we should pay attention to the actual cost these changes incur, as predicted by the analysis tools. Accumulated technical debt reveals that additional IMD code repayment and maintenance costs are limited to only a few $1,000s in the near future, but those can drastically worsen for IMD manufacturers in the longer term if left unchecked. The next plots show two of the components for calculating the technical debt interest, which are cyclomatic complexity and lines of code, so as to offer more insights on our application behavior. Cyclomatic complexity refers to the number of independent paths throughout the code due to control flow branches, for example an if statement. The higher the cyclomatic complexity, the harder the software becomes to understand, maintain, and test. We see that the cyclomatic complexity of the security code increases at a faster rate than that of the medical code due to the type of complexity involved in the respective applications. For example, the security code implements the secure communication protocol in the form of a finite state machine. Even a minimal change in this protocol results in a significant increase in the corresponding state machine complexity. For instance, numerous fallbacks are added so that the IMD state machine returns to a stable state in case the communication is disrupted midway. Since a significant portion of the IMD code is composed of control flow statements, the lines of code curve is very similar to the cyclomatic complexity curve. The higher cyclomatic complexity of the security code is finally also reflected in the breaking point curves. The potential breaking point of the security code at a given point in time can be reached significantly earlier than that of the medical code. This observation indicates that the security code should be developed after careful planning. It also tells us that the medical code is easier to maintain since its breaking point curve is always higher than the security curve. I will now conclude the discussion. In this work, we embarked on a methodology to quantitatively analyze the cost of adding security in the existing IMDs from the perspective of embedded software technical debt. This is the first time that technical debt, which is a relatively new concept, has been used to analyze this class of embedded systems. We started with the question, is it economically sustainable to add security to IMDs? By necessarily relying on a synthetically constructed IMD code base, we found that security software, on one hand, is costlier to develop and maintain than the pre-existent purely medical software in IMDs. But overall costs are insignificant in the short term. On the other hand, the higher complexity and volatility of the security code base is projected not only to dominate future costs, but also to disrupt the economic viability of IMD products in the next decade if the IMD software technical debt growth is left unchecked. And with this, we come to the end of this presentation. I thank you for your attention.